Hello and welcome to Quadriga. It's been a very public humbling for a once triumphant titan of tech. In less than a year, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has gone from celebrating the milestone of 2 billion monthly users to a two-day grilling in both houses of Congress. Following revelations that nearly 90 million Facebook users' data were shared with third parties without their knowledge, Zuckerberg admitted, "It was my mistake and I'm sorry." Breach of privacy, hate speech, fake news, election manipulation. Are such abuses an inevitable result of Facebook's business model? Is Zuckerberg really prepared to take responsibility, or is it time for regulators to step in? Facebook, the anti-social network? That's our topic today on Quadriga, and these are our guests. It's a pleasure to welcome Grace Dobush. She is editor at Handelsblatt Global, and she says Facebook is too big to regulate, but if we don't regulate it, it will regulate us. It's a pleasure to have Malte Lemming on the show once again. He is senior editor at the Berlin daily, the Tagesspiegel, and he says Facebook is a business, and businesses want to make money. And we're very pleased to have with us our colleague, Carl Nassmann. He is editor at DW, and he says Facebook's problems are a wake-up call about our lack of privacy on the internet. Let me start by asking you, Grace, did you think that the hearings that we have just seen taking place in Congress, will they really change anything?
I think the hearings showed us one thing, and that is that Mark Zuckerberg has the real power here. He was so well prepared for any question they threw at him. Any apologies that he gave were concessions to the power of the U.S. Congress. But when it comes down to it, they have a constituency of 300-some million. He has a constituency of 2 billion people.
Yeah, what's Facebook is the biggest, second biggest country or something like that in the world, right? Just Facebook users. And it seemed to me from watching those hearings, first of all, many of the lawmakers were almost deferential, asking for autographs, in fact, at some points. But the other thing that I noticed was it wasn't just that Zuckerberg kind of had the power, but the lawmakers just didn't really understand Facebook. It's such a complicated business model and a complicated company that he had the power in that way as well, that no one really knew what questions to ask him.
Malte Lemming, I know that you have visited Facebook's campus. From what you saw there and from watching these hearings take place this week, would you take Mark Zuckerberg at his word when he says, yes, Facebook is going to change its ways? He did say when Facebook got its 2 billionth monthly user that the network definitely would need to take expanding responsibility. Do you think we'll see it do that?
2 billion monthly users is the biggest country in the world, not just
biggest,
the second.
Yeah.
It is the biggest country in the world. So, yes, what I saw when I was there, and there were still these huge signs, move fast and break things, don't be afraid. You had a working class of like 20, 25, 30 years old, sneakers, T-shirts, and the mood was just so, we are hip, we are cool, we are the new society, we can change the world. It's the hippie culture mixing with a lot of money. So I take him by his word when he says, I'm sorry, because I don't think that he really wanted to be a part of the pro-Trump or pro-Brexit force. He is, I think, a liberal. And,
in the sense that Facebook was misused by Russian trolls and others.
I don't take him by his word when he's saying we will change. I think this has to be the proof is in the pudding. You have to wait and see. I don't think that Congress will do a lot to really regulate Facebook.
Grace Dobush, let me ask you this as a business journalist. Facebook's stock value has definitely taken a hit. Some users have canceled their accounts. How serious and widespread do you think the loss of trust is?
I'm not sure that the loss of trust is going to have an immediate effect on the stock price. The stock was briefly up during the congressional hearings. I have a feeling that the reaction in Europe is quite a bit more strong than in the United States. In the United States, we almost don't have an expectation of privacy on the level that Europeans do. To some extent, I assume that my data has been compromised many times over at this point. What is there to protect? I don't know that there's anything to protect. But at the same time, you mentioned Mark Zuckerberg. His apology was perhaps sincere. Whether he will change, who knows? But the road to this Facebook crisis is paved with good intentions, right? Like, they thought that they were making something great for the world. They thought that they could change the world, and that type of optimism, it's really a new digital colonialism in a way. We have seen one thing, and that's that Facebook likes to make its own rules, but that may not be the best procedure for the future of humanity.
Speaking of wanting to change the world, we do have a short report on Facebook's origins. So let's take a quick look at that.
It all started small. The wunderkind of the tech sector founded his social network for students while studying at Harvard. But Mark Zuckerberg had a big vision, connecting people around the world for free. Facebook became the world's biggest social network, making Zuckerberg a billionaire in his mid-20s. The network grew rapidly, along with criticism of it. For years, the company's been accused of poor transparency and privacy protection, as well as letting data be used for propaganda purposes. Critics are also disturbed by the fact that Facebook and its founder stubbornly refuse to accept responsibility for the misuse of data and attempts at manipulation. The shy tech pioneer briefly withdrew from the public eye, which just made the situation worse. Now he's finally changed tack. Zuckerberg and his company promised improvements, saying that Facebook wants to again be what he calls an optimistic company. But is that still possible?
So as we have now discovered through the revelations of the past weeks, Malte Laming, what looks free really isn't. We simply pay with our data. The big question that still, I think, is a very open question after those hearings is, can Facebook really transform its business model, or is it not actually simply based on sharing these data?
It is based on sharing these data. I mean, they can't, I would say they can't change this business model. The business model is give me your data, and I try to elaborate a personalized advertisement out of it. And that is where the profit comes from. I don't think they can change it. Mark Zuckerberg hinted at one thing. He says, okay, we can talk about if you don't want to give me your data, you can pay for the service. So they are discussing this. I mean, because it is a business model, and it gives the consumer, might even give the consumer in the future the choice to say, no, you don't. I'm not allowing you to use my data for any purpose at all, but I'm willing to pay for the service.
Grace, you and Carl as well both said that you think, in fact, many users are essentially complicit. Either they don't care or they've become fatalistic and just assume this is how things work. But is it not possible that attitudes are changing and that more and more users perhaps are now becoming aware of the ramifications of this business model and will demand changes?
Absolutely. I think this is the first time that the United States has really had a discussion about what online privacy means, what sovereignty as a person on the internet means. Everything that we know about the internet currently is funded through this attention economy. We're paying with our eyeballs, we're paying with our data. Whether there is another way forward, I'm not sure.
Certainly, Carl, the scandal doesn't seem to have hurt Facebook's ad business very much. We've heard from Sheryl Sandberg that a few advertisers apparently are pausing, as she said.
Right.
But in general, the ads are still coming in. What does that tell us?
Yeah, I mean, I think Facebook controls, around a third of the ad market. There's 2.2 billion monthly users, so this is not something that advertisers want to give up. I mean, it's such a great tool for them. And Facebook's business model is very sophisticated. It's one of the few places where an advertiser can go, advertise something, and then know for sure if it actually worked. They can track their users all the way to an online store and see if they actually bought the product that they were advertising. So this isn't something that advertisers are going to give up very easily, I don't think. But I think it is true that consumers and people that use Facebook are starting to think a little bit more about the privacy implications about this. It's hard not to when all the headlines this week have been about Mark Zuckerberg testifying in front of Congress.
But maybe data privacy is, in a way, a very abstract term. I mean, you don't feel the violation of data privacy except you're personally attached by it. I mean, for example, if your employer says, oh, I have some knowledge that you Googled for 2 years a certain kind of disease, then, oh, why does he know us? Then you really feel what privacy data means. But as long as this doesn't happen, it's just a very abstract term.
Let me ask all three of you, have you changed anything about your own habits, given what you've learned about Facebook? Grace?
Over the last few years, I'm using Facebook less than I was in the early years. I joined Facebook in 2005 when it was first available to my university in the United States. So I've been with it a long time. I find myself sharing less. At the same time, I run some small businesses. And as a small business owner, Facebook and other social media have been so essential in making it possible for micro businesses to see success. And so I can't really extricate myself from Facebook at all.
Carl?
I think a lot of people are in the same position. They've been using Facebook for so long. It's not something that you can just give up or delete Facebook, as we've seen that hashtag kind of trending online. Me personally, I actually deleted the Facebook app and the Messenger app from my phone.
Same.
Because of privacy concerns. You see how these apps kind of follow you around and the big privacy concessions you have to give to these apps. So I've deleted that, and we'll see where that takes me. But I'm not ready to give up on Facebook yet.
I haven't changed anything because I've never been part of Facebook. I have no Facebook account. I have a Twitter account, which I use quite frequently, but no Facebook. As an editor, I have the great honor and luxury to publish my opinion whenever I want. So, and I can stay in contact with my friends in other terms like Facebook.
I think the delete Facebook movement, if you could call it that, is a bit short-sighted. People maybe have the privilege to delete Facebook, but for underprivileged populations or oppressed populations, especially, say, refugee populations, LGBT populations, Facebook and other social media are an essential tool to connecting to communities that you may not be geographically close to. And so we can't, it's a death sentence for some communities to delete it.
I want to come back to that point in just a moment. But one question to you, Carl, and this picks up essentially on what we heard in those hearings again. Mark Zuckerberg was asked explicitly, what exactly is Facebook? The questioner said, is it more like advertising, is it more like publishing, or is it perhaps even more like a telecom utility? What would be your answer to that question?
I think it's funny that, 14, 15 years later, we're still asking, what is Facebook, right? I mean, we haven't figured it out yet. I think it keeps evolving. Just like most tech companies and social media companies, it started off as a way for us university students to connect with people. Now, there's so many things integrated. You can send payments, you can do shopping, you can watch TV series now. So it's a little bit of everything. I think Mark Zuckerberg doesn't want to call it a media company that opens it up for regulation, but it's becoming a media company. It's a little bit of journalism, it's a little bit of commerce. I think it's a bit of everything, and that is what makes it so difficult, I think, for many U.S. lawmakers to grasp what Facebook is.
So, Malte Lemming, Zuckerberg's answer was, I consider us to be a technology company, I'm quoting here. The primary thing we do is have engineers that write code and build services for other people. Is that a satisfactory answer?
At least I think he's right. I mean, they don't produce content. So they're different to a media company or a publishing house. So they basically distribute content that others are producing, and they do it with a certain kind of algorithm. They invented in it. So, but do they really? Is it a media house? I would be very hesitant to call it like that.
I would argue that it's more of a telecom, to be honest. It's a method of communication for many people. Yeah. It distributes content, sure, but it's maybe a new type of category altogether.
But on the other hand, like a media house or a publishing house, it is influencing the perception of reality. Because of the algorithm that puts some topics on the top or not, and where the party is and what people are talking about, they decide upon what kind of topic is the hottest topic right now. So, and this is influencing the perception of reality. So in a way, they are more than just distributing other people's contents.
Let's take a brief look at the direction of that influence, picking up on what you said earlier about Facebook's role in creating bonds within communities. Last year, as Facebook hit that 2 billion user mark, Mark Zuckerberg said that he saw a new mission for his company to bring the world closer together. But as we have discovered, that is a two-edged sword.
Social networks such as Twitter and Facebook are platforms facilitating communication between people. Individuals can connect virtually to groups for the purpose of following common goals. That has often resulted in protest movements gathering strength, or even in revolutions, like the 2010 Arab Spring, when Egyptians took to the streets demanding freedom and human rights. Protests on the scale of this one at Tahrir Square could only be organized through social media. But there is a flip side. What happens when the social media hive mind develops a mob mentality? Or when people use social networks to break the law? Like the terrorist organization IS, which recruits new members through these networks, unobserved. So what prevails, the good parts or the bad ones?
And let me put that question right to you, Grace. Is Facebook a boon or a bane for democracy?
It's certainly changing the way that we interact with each other and with the wider world. I do not know how history will shake out.
Carl, interestingly enough, after all the revelations about what was happening in terms of hate speech on Facebook and so on, Germany told Facebook, you know what? You are, at least to some degree, a media company with a gatekeeper responsibility, and we expect you now to start hiring editors to keep watch over the content on your site. Hundreds of people have been hired here in Germany to do what Facebook claimed it wasn't in a position to do, edit content. So what does that tell us? Is it not possible for regulators to take action and compel Facebook to take the kind of responsibility Mark Zuckerberg keeps promising?
I think it is possible. And I think Europe, Germany is kind of leading the way in terms of showing that large tech companies should and can be regulated. We saw with the hate speech outcry here in Germany, when people would report a hateful comment or something that you'd see maybe a picture or a video on Facebook, it wouldn't get taken down. And now there's tens of thousands of people around the world working for Facebook doing that exact same thing. Zuckerberg keeps saying, look, it's all about artificial intelligence. This is his solution. He wants to see AI programs scanning the network for maybe hate speech or something that could be anti-democratic. I think that's part of the solution, but it's going to be, you need real people to do this and make the kind of judgment calls, because it's difficult for a robot or an algorithm to determine what hate speech is. I think it's just a matter of moving some of those billions of dollars that Facebook makes and putting that into an actual effort to try to crack down on this stuff.
I think it's very, very difficult, and I'm very critical about all these. I mean, Facebook should be a marketplace. And what are the criteria? Do content have to be reasonable or trustworthy or nice, or how do you value that?
We have criteria in terms of constitutional protections right here in Germany. We have criteria. Inviolability of human dignity. Is that not a sufficient criteria to apply to the internet as well?
We're talking about an international technology business model. So we in Germany have the denial of the Holocaust, for example. The Turks have the denial of the Armenian Holocaust. The French have the opposite. If you deny the denial of the Armenian Holocaust, and so every country is elaborating its own standards. How can Facebook deal, and do you really want to give the power about what is allowed to private people working with Facebook or an algorithm? I think it's very, very difficult.
The fact is, Europe has taken some very concrete steps now. Its new data protection law is coming into effect in just about a month. And during these hearings, Mark Zuckerberg seemed to indicate some willingness to look at that as a possible model for what Facebook could do internationally. Would that be a solution, Grace, for Facebook and the U.S. perhaps to take a leaf from Europe's page?
I think that that's just a stopgap solution. Honestly, I'm skeptical whether they will be able to implement all of those changes in time, but also that it begs the question, why does Europe get to decide what these privacy standards will be? And likewise, why should Facebook then decide whether or how much it complies with these standards? I think there needs to be a wider discussion about personal digital identity. Around the world, I don't want any our digital identities right now are going through the gatekeeper of Facebook or the gatekeeper of Twitter. We don't really own our digital identities. There's a wider discussion happening now in tech circles, especially when it comes to data privacy, about the idea of an autonomous digital identity. No idea what that looks like yet.
But are you telling us there's a technical solution for this? We don't need regulation?
I'm saying that it cannot be regulated by a government, because we see what governments can do with the wrong type of power. It can't also be regulated by any private company. It needs to be a larger, non-governmental solution.
Carl, would you agree with that, or would you say that the kind of initiatives we're seeing here in Europe, potentially also in the U.S., there is a snowballing movement now, even in the U.S., to say, you know what, it's time to start thinking about regulation. Do you see all of that as ineffectual?
I think regulation can be effective. I think there has to be some sort of government regulation. You can't just let Facebook regulate itself. We've been letting Facebook do that for more than a decade. It hasn't worked, clearly. And I think as soon as what we saw in terms of it potentially affecting the 2016 election, as soon as we've seen data being leaked to shady companies, that is kind of what had to happen to wake people up in the U.S. and maybe even lawmakers. The problem is I don't think that Congress in the U.S. really wants to do anything. They haven't been very effectual in it. So it's interesting to see the EU, and I think it's a good thing. There's this new GDPR protection regulation here in the EU. They're doing basically what the American politicians don't want to do. They're finally putting some real regulations down. It's not going to be a perfect regulation. I'm not sure that there is one, but it's a first step, and that needed to happen. That needs to tell Facebook, hey, look, you know, you need to start to play ball with us. I think that's why Zuckerberg even went to Congress in the first place. He knows that there is legislation and regulation on the way, so he's there to kind of shape it, and he wants to be on Capitol Hill to have his voice heard as well.
He said, Malte, it has to be the right kind of regulation, yeah. And he also said very expressly that he thinks if regulation goes too far, it will create a competitive disadvantage vis-a-vis China, particularly in regard to artificial intelligence. Would you buy that argument?
China is very far in artificial intelligence, and so far he's right. But I would say, what kind of regulation do we need? I think it's completely wrong to put all the blame on the consumer. He has to be more inform himself, and read through all these 10 or 20 pages in advance, and if you sign yes or no. You have to give him clear choices. Are you agreeing that your data is used for personalized advertisement, yes or no? Do you agree that your data is used for political advertisement and analyzed by yes or no? Do you agree, blah, blah, blah? Clear options, clear yes or no questions. Nothing else. Don't put all the blame to the consumer. Put it to Facebook, saying this is what we're talking about.
Grace Dobush, there is also some discussion now about whether Facebook and the other big titans of tech, Amazon, Google, have gotten too big for their britches. Whether we have seen a cartelization of the digital economy on the basis of what's called network effects, that in fact, these companies become much more attractive the more users that they have. Question would be, will we see antitrust measures coming in future? Even The Economist has warned that they could be on the way.
I think that that's a real possibility. I was going to ask the question, if Facebook is getting regulated, why not Google? Google has more than 2 billion users of its Android platform, billions using Gmail, Google Maps, Chrome browser. All of these companies have gotten larger than any companies the world has seen before. At the same time, we're focusing so much on these American companies when Tencent in China is nearly as large as some of these companies. I think that we can't ignore the worldwide implications of this type of regulation. At the same time, I don't know that piecemeal regulation of these types of large companies is going to be enough. I'm reminded a little bit of the Berlin-Brandenburg airport. You know, it's so big. We've spent so much time on it. We keep on patching up the little things. We fix the escalator. But when it comes down to it, maybe we just need to tear it all down and start from the beginning.
Basically, Carl, that would be the question. Is Facebook, in essence, too big to fail and too big to regulate?
I don't know. That just seems so fatalistic to me. I think it's a big company, but Look, it's not just Facebook, as you mentioned. You have Google, and I think even the next big company on the way is Amazon. They're putting Alexa devices in everyone's living room. So it's not about regulating Facebook. It's about regulating our privacy and regulating tech companies in general. So whatever we regulate with Facebook has to then apply to all these other companies as well. That's really important.
Thank you very much to all of you for being with us, and thanks to all of you out there for tuning in. See you soon.